Mówimy o planie
We're talking about the devil's plan.
Plan diabła w świecie.
And his plan in the social and political sphere is communism.
Są takie trzy podstawowe,
There are three fundamental assumptions of communism that they want to convince the whole world of.
których oni chcą cały świat przekonać. Po pierwsze,
First of all, there's no God. That's the first assumption of communism.
tego mówimy, że jest
That's why we say that it's the devil's system, since if God says yes, the devil says no.
nie. Nie? I tu właśnie
So, there is no God. That's the devil's goal. That's the fundamental goal of communism.
i cel w odniesieniu do
The second goal, with regard to you,
jesteś zwierzę.
is that you're an animal and that you must behave like an animal.
Ten temat będzie
Today we'll be developing this a little bit more and talking about the plan that the communists have, especially for the younger generation.
oni się, wiecie, nazywają ekolodzy.
Today they call themselves ecologists, globalists, neo-Marxists.
To tam nazw jest
There are a lot of different names, but the common denominators are the three that I present here.
jesteś zwierzęciem,
There is no God.
masz jak zwierzę. I
The second one is you're an animal and you must behave like one. And the third assumption is that you have no natural rights.
nie masz przyrodzonej własności,
You have no innate possessions or acquired possessions
po prostu
or bought possessions. You simply have no possessions. There's no private property and you have no freedom.
partia.
Everything is given to you by the party or the state and in the future by a world government. In other words, there are no God-given laws or freedoms.
Nie? Tu mówiłem,
Last week I talked about how this concept works itself out or develops if we assume there is no God.
pierwszy
The first and most well-known example is relativism, which claims there are no unchanging moral laws. Everything is changeable. That's what everyone is being taught today in different ways, from childhood to adulthood.
nie ma,
Nothing is permanent. Everyone has their own truth.
masz swoją
You have your truth, this lady over there has hers, and that gentleman in the corner also has his truth.
prawda, bo prawdy
All this is bullshit because there is no truth. That's today's message with which you are bombarded from university or by some stupid show on TV. The dumbest show, the smartest university will pour that same truth into your mind.
Bóg,
God is not the Lord of history.
chrześcijanie wierzą, że
Christians believe that Jesus is the Lord of history, that he's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords.
komuniści
Communists say that God is not the Lord of history.
rządzą nią prawa naturalne,
Natural laws rule over history, and here we have some social class struggles,
ocieplenie,
different kinds of fights for
nie, czy
global warming,
mocą, ale chyba
but I think they want to keep warm.
nie, czy oni się mrożą jakoś, raczej, czyli, aha, jest
There's a small fraction of chilly people.
Trzeci taki punkt, z którego
The third point resulting from the fact that there is no God is another sphere that is being attacked, which is the nation.
nie, mówi się,
It's said that the family is outdated.
zdarzała, nie, że już w ogóle tu w Austrii, nasza Polonia austriacka i przyjaciele z Austrii,
In Austria, our Polish community and friends there are telling us that, for example, the sign of a woman walking with her child is
to jest
eliminated since it's racist, xenophobic,
ten rasizm, ksenofobia, nie wiem, co,
I don't know.
lecznictwo.
something like backwardness or, in general, the worst thing possible.
Teraz jest już wiele,
Now you'll see two lesbians or two gays on the signs for pedestrians.
dla pieszych też zdaje się mężczyzna,
It also seems now that a man in a hat can't be on such a sign.
znaki graficzne to jest już objaw seksizmu.
It's now sign sexism, racism, and probably even pedophilia.
Tak się właśnie
But that's what's happening right now. There can't be a normal family.
normalna rodzina. Kościół oczywiście też już jest albo niepotrzebny.
The church is obviously either unnecessary or it has to proclaim communist ideals.
Ideały komunistyczne, no to wtedy jeszcze jakoś
Then it can exist for a little while.
przez pewien czas egzystować. No i dzisiaj
And today, the fight with the nation is on.
nie, naród
The nation is an obsolete concept.
budujemy,
Let's build a new society into social classes without divisions, nations, and religions.
nie ma Boga? No
So,
jest.
there's no God.
Niby ludzki,
That's the so-called humanistic, but really diabolical plan that's developing.
dzisiaj chciałem, żebyśmy troszeczkę
Today, I want us to deal with the second point, which is that you're an animal and that you must behave like an animal.
do pionierów. Jest tu
Who belonged to the All-Union Pioneer Organization? Is there anyone here?
ale przynajmniej
No?
niektórzy
But at least some remember the pioneer days.
czytaliśmy to
Everyone my age had readings in Russian language class.
czytanki na języku rosyjskim od 5. klasy.
I think Russian language classes were obligatory
Był
as of the 5th grade of elementary school.
więcej na pewno niż historii.
We had many, many hours of it, certainly more than of Polish history.
Czytanki o pionierach. Nie? Niekiedy w kraju
Sometimes in the USSR, there was a newspaper with very nice illustrations done on chalk paper,
gazet
where the beauty of the Soviet Union was shown,
radzieckiego było
and the beauty of nature.
piękno przyrody, tak, oczywiście, to prawda.
Yes, of course, this is true, but they never showed the White Sea, Baltic Canal, nor the devastated areas in those cities.
Tych obszarów przez te miasta, takie obozy pracy, to nie, tylko
Labor camps were not shown,
obrazki.
but instead there were nice pictures.
Przyjemnie oglądało, no i tam zawsze
They were even enjoyable to watch, and there was always a story about how great and superior the Soviet Union was.
w tej całej
And somewhere in this whole propaganda, everyone came across the story of the pioneer heroes.
momencie takim
So, on what educational foundation was the pioneer organization built on?
kulcie Pawki
On the Pavlik Morozov cult.
był
Who was Pavlik Morozov?
jak
As you know, he was a Ukrainian boy.
Ukrainiec. Wtedy Rosja zdecydowała,
Back then, Russia decided that it would finish off the richer part of Ukraine's population by means of starvation.
po prostu weźmie,
It's simple. Murder them by starvation.
trzeba tam
It's cheaper. We don't need any cyclones, any lead,
ołowiu,
any ideas.
tam różnych pomysłów, jakiś głodem po prostu i się
Simply use hunger and the rest will take care of itself.
zabrano całe
So first, they took away all of the grain from the Ukraine, and then they put a military cordon on the border till people died.
ruski plan
That was the Russian plan.
ludzkości. No oczywiście ludzie
Of course, people tried to get around it in various ways.
kradli gdzieś,
Either they stole from the Soviet storehouses, or more thoughtful landlords tried to hide the grain.
że próbowali gdzieś schować zboże.
I don't remember what bad thing Pavlik Morris discovered about his parents,
Którzy
they who were trying to save their family's life.
chyba
I think it's that they hid some grain. Maybe the pioneers here will correct me.
nie poprawią.
They probably hid the grain and did not hand it over like the state had commanded.
Byli
They didn't obey the state.
posłuszni chrześcijanie
Some Christian legalists will say that Pavlik Morozov was right.
rodziców, bo oni nie słuchali państwa.
He reported his parents because they did not listen to the state. The Soviet Union ordered to hand in all the grain, and they did not give it all up.
Sowieci rodziców
Of course, Soviets came and executed the parents and declared Pavlik Morozov a hero.
i całej wsi, że
They told the whole village that they must now follow his example.
wieś nie była tak
The village wasn't foolish.
morozowa.
What did they do with Pavlik Morozov? Do you know?
Zabiła.
They killed him.
Tak mniej więcej jeszcze
They had more or less a sense of justice in that very moment.
Sprawiedliwości. No i w tym
And well, at that moment, Pavlik Morozov landed on the communist altar all across the world as an example for all children to follow.
wszystkich dzieci doniósł nas.
He reported his parents.
To jest hasło
That's the communist motto for youth.
młodzieży. Zbuntuj się.
Rebel.
Byście
If you think that this is human in origin, open up the epistle to Timothy or the epistle to the Romans. We can find this.
mian, możemy sobie to znaleźć. Jeszcze do tego
We'll come back to this later, but look at the verse from the first chapter of the epistle to the Romans,
zobaczcie.
verse 30.
Z pierwszego rozdziału listu do Rzymian, rozdział 30. Tam najpierw jest plan
First, the communist plan is shown, and we'll see how slanderous those people are.
potwarcy, tu jacy są ci ludzie, którzy
Those who suppress the truth about God, those who proclaim the theory of evolution, we see their moral background.
potwarcy, oszczercy.
Backbiters, it's nothing strange.
Profesor Rychwałd tu też jest.
Professor Rickwald is present here and is eavesdropping on what is happening in the center of conservatism. Lately, Professor Rickwald demonstrated how, for example, you can find proof for an intermediate link, a walking mushroom.
Znaleźć
Please check it out for yourselves.
ogniwo pośrednie, chodzący grzyb. Proszę sobie zobaczyć. Nie, tanio, za 100 można mieć
It's cheap.
chodzącego.
For $100, you can have a walking mushroom. He was also saying, while teaching children in some kind of evolutionistic kindergarten, or maybe in an elementary school,
Wykopali z
how the excavation of such an intermediate link
Sienkiewiczem, a
between Ziemkiewicz, a Polish political journalist, and a human,
nie,
between an ape and Ziemkiewicz was in fact set up from a pig's tooth. It's interesting that communists were producing these links along with Jesuits. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was a brother, a Jesuit, I think, right? A Jesuit that in the 1930s, along with communists, took a hammer, a screwdriver, and sickle, and you have an intermediate link. Backbiters and so on. But in the description of these people in Romans 1:30, we find that they're inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents. We can say that this rebellion against parents is a manifestation of godlessness. It's a manifestation of communist godlessness. Here we have the plan. And if we look at the description in the Epistle of Timothy, we see the effect. Here you have it in 2 Timothy. These are the people of the end times. The Apostle Paul warns, prophesies, saying that what the future will be like. And he says that at the end of time, that's how society will look like. Third chapter from verse 2 to 5.
Może ktoś, mamy mikrofon jakiś, żeby mnie na chwilę zluzować.
2 Timothy chapter 3 verses 2 to 5. For men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. Turn away from such people. Thank you. This shows the social, political, and custom-related situation of the church right before the rapture, right before the apocalypse.
Czasów tuż przed porwaniem, tuż przed czasem apokalipsy. Czyli w tych czasach ostatecznych tak będzie.
So, in the final days, that's what society will look like. Look,
Zobaczcie ten opis.
the description isn't somehow foreign to us.
Nie? My już to
We're already seeing this. The conclusion is quite simple, but I'm not going to mock your intellect, so to speak.
sami możecie sobie ten wniosek.
You can come to the conclusion by yourselves.
Jednym z podstawowych
Look.
ataków na
One of the main attacks on us is that we are an armed religious group, as if the legal possession of a gun by law-abiding citizens was something wrong. This is a communist strategy.
uzbrojony obywatel.
For communists, an armed citizen is one of the greatest threats.
Oczywiście jak
Of course, if this citizen is stupid, even an intercontinental rocket won't be able to help him.
nie? Dlatego jeszcze
For that reason, he must be aware, informed, moral, and an armed citizen. Then there would be no communism.
Kalesona, nie? Dlatego trzeba.
They'll run as fast as possible. That's why you have to disarm citizens.
Pierwsza rzecz, jak
So, first, what's the attack?
uzbrojony
That we're some kind of armed sect? Like I said, as if the possession of a gun by law-abiding citizens were something bad. You can immediately see what the source of this is. It's a communist mindset that must have come up with such an accusation.
pod naszym adresem, że jest
The second accusation we face is that we're an armed apocalyptic sect.
czyli tak, jak czytamy,
So,
że ludzie
when we read that people in the end times will be like that, and we open the window or the television and we see such people and such a society, can we really say, no, there won't be an apocalypse, lies, there's nothing, we don't see anything, let's pretend we're fools.
rozbrojony
So, a disarmed blockhead, that's precisely the plan of Catholic communists who attack us today.
proszę bardzo,
So,
słuchajcie,
go ahead, you can listen to whoever you want.
chce. Apostoł Paweł,
Here, the Apostle Paul shows a world dominated by the devil,
świat zdominowany przez diabła. Że spisek diabła
that the devil's plot has a social effect.
taki daje efekt społeczny.
It will create such a society that wasn't like that before.
Jeszcze tak
When the Apostle Paul says that the people of the end times will be such, it means that in his time, they weren't like that yet,
nie są.
right? Because otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense. What kind of prophecy would that be? They're already like that, so what? It's like if I said that kids in the end times will be disobedient towards their parents,
W czasach ostatecznych
but that they're obedient today.
dzisiaj są posłuszne. Już nie są.
They're already disobedient. We know that it's happening, unfortunately.
To niestety Dlatego zobaczcie, że tu jest z jednej strony...
So, on the one hand, we can see that we have a kind of materialistic plot, and then on the other hand, we can see its outworking or its effect,
Wydawałoby się,
and its success from what seems to be a stupid plot.
tam już powiedziano, że
We've been told that communism has fallen,
widzimy, że on
but we can see that it's triumphing more and more each day.
nie? Czyli zobaczcie,
So, the cognitive sphere of communism, or its method, is so stupid that no one seems to bother fighting against it.
jest tak głupi, że to wiecie, nawet już nikt się nie zajmuje zwalczaniem tego. Ale jednocześnie cały czas...
But at the same time, it keeps going forward all the time.
Na pewno jest
Why?
wniosek ludzki za tym stoi, nie?
Surely there's a human plot behind it. We can see, for example, if we enter a university in Austria, and if we enter a state university in the United States,
W Stanach
we will often be welcomed by the same communist wall poster.
No to zaraz.
Well, hold on a minute.
Robi to
If both are doing the same thing,
umówili.
didn't they arrange it? That's what you're trying to tell us?
Na dwóch końcach świata robią
On two sides of the world, they're doing the exact same thing. So on the one hand, we have a human plot, that's obvious.
dochodził.
I won't dwell on that for too long.
To, że ludzie
But the fact that people have repressed their
łatwo
critical thinking to the point that they so easily buy such a lie,
cofnie,
then that's a spiritual phenomenon.
to już jest zjawisko duchowe.
In the second epistle to the Thessalonians, the Apostle Paul explains why people believe such stupidity,
Głupstwo. Dlaczego,
why they believe such foolishness. Do you remember?
dlaczego ludzie przyjmują,
Why people accept nonsense.
łykają jak
They gulp it down like pelicans.
jest prosto.
There's a simple reason.
Słucham? Wcześniej.
They had previously rejected the truth.
Pamiętacie, opisałem kiedyś
Do you remember I once described the scene of a professor of a right-wing Lublin university who gathered for supper? And you know what they were discussing?
było tam parę osób z was,
Some of you were there at that supper. Professors,
profesorowie, doktorzy,
doctors, post-PhDs and so forth.
kowani, różni. Tematem dyskusji
The matter under discussion was horoscopes.
oto elita narodu.
That's the elite of our nation.
Znacie rozwinięcie.
You know the development of that brilliant phrase.
To jest zjawisko już duchowe.
That's a spiritual phenomenon.
Jest wspomagane.
It's of course aided, so the plan that's fulfilled by a group of people meets the spiritual atmosphere which Satan creates by blurring or pushing people away from the truth.
Zamazywanie czy odpychanie ludzi od prawdy. I
And the result of that is precisely an end times society.
ale wróćmy
But let's go back to the animal.
do
You're an animal and you have a duty to behave like an animal.
i masz obowiązek zachowywać się jak zwierzę. Nie? To taka parafraza.
It's a paraphrase of one of our national slogans.
Nowych jest 11 listopada.
Soon it's November 11th, so it's worth to remember
Czy jestem
whether or not I'm Polish.
stworzonym
Am I a human being created in the image and likeness of God, or am I an animal? Because if I'm an animal, then I have duties to behave like an animal.
jestem stworzony
But if I'm created in the image and likeness of God, then my duty is to reflect God's character in my life.
Boga? No to proste.
It's simple, no? That's why I was created.
Stworzony.
When it comes to acting from this level of communism, that you have to behave like an animal, there are some executive orders.
Zwierzę, czyli drugi punkt. Pierwszy, nie ma Boga. Drugi, jesteś zwierzęciem i masz się zachowywać jak zwierzę. No to tutaj są takie rozporządzenia wykonawcze. Nie? Po pierwsze,
First of all, Christian moral standards must be rejected.
pamiętacie tekst międzynarodówki?
Do you remember the lyrics to the International?
Na czym zbudujemy to?
On what will we build this new world?
Na gruzach.
On the old one's ruins, right?
Bo nie wiem, czy tam dobrze pamiętam. No. Powinniście tu pamiętać, dobrze. Trzeba
Christianity must be destroyed. Christian moral standards in the educational or social sphere must be rejected.
czy tego związku ze społeczeństwem, zaraz pokażę dlaczego.
I'll show you why shortly. The Christian education principles must be rejected. This is the main goal of communists when it comes to acquiring you, the young generation.
Młodego pokolenia. To hasło masz
The slogan, you must rebel.
zbuntował się
The devil rebelled.
jego
His, so to speak, basic method of action is to rebel people or make people rebel against God, against the truth, against parents.
rodzicom. Nie? Dlaczego
Why exactly did the communists come up with this? Or why are they doing this?
zują, bo nie wiem, czy oni
Because I don't know if they came up with it or if the devil suggested it.
ten problem
There's room to discuss that.
starca.
But why don't they focus on the elderly?
Dlaczego nie skupiają?
Why don't they even focus on adults or mature people?
Dlaczego
Why does this love for children flourish in them?
w nich tak kwitnie? Skąd pedofilia u
Where does pedophilia come from in communists?
to właśnie?
Because pedophilia is that love for children.
Skąd to u nich?
Where does it come from?
Oni
Well, they know God's principles,
Boże zasady. A ta zasada
and this principle is presented in the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6.
22 rozdział 6 werset. Stoi tam tak.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
A nie zejdzie z niej nawet w starości. Czyli co? Zaczniesz
What does that mean? If you start educating an old man with communist ways, what will happen?
nie będzie.
Well, nothing.
Wzruszy
He'll shrug his shoulder and move on.
nie. Może się popuka.
Maybe he'll tap himself on the head when the communists with rifles and bayonets turn around.
Tam nie
You can't really defraud an old man.
no, pan
Of course, there will always be a couple of blockheads,
chce tego, ale mówimy o zjawisku.
but we're talking about social phenomena, which means we must get control of the human masses.
Gadał,
You can talk to an old man, they'll tap themselves on the head. If you start telling these communist tales to those who have families, children, who work hard and so on, they will tap themselves on the head
bo oni już są
because
zaprogramowani.
they're already programmed to a different value system, so to say, to different goals.
Dlaczego? Bo właśnie ktoś zrobił
And that's because someone in their life did a good job during their youth.
w młodości. No kto?
Well, who?
Bo zwykle to wina rodziców.
Usually it's the parents' fault. That's why there are talks about toxic families and other types of nonsense.
Rodzice na
Where we are concerned that parents did a good job. You know, they weren't perfect.
oni różnymi błędami, grzechami i tak.
They made mistakes.
Robili dobrą robotę. Oni nas wychowali.
But in other words, they raised us.
Wychowali nas, do,
They raised us for hard work.
wychowali nas,
They raised us according to moral standards.
wychowali nas do poświęcenia na
They raised us to dedicate ourselves.
rozumieniu dla patrii, bo
For example, to the family, or in the broader sense, to our homeland. They raised us.
nam
Of course, in this educational process, the church and the state once brought some support, but the family was the foundation.
podstawą, bo chodziło o to, to już dzisiaj,
Because everyone knows today that the child's values are shaped in the first years of his life,
jak
from about 5 to 10 years.
w latach jego życia. Czyli mniej więcej 5, może 10 lat. Nie? Pierwsze 5-10 lat
In the first 5 to 10 years, the child chooses a track.
albo tusze.
He'll either go this way or that way.
Mieć różne,
He may have some kind of flaws, but the way he will follow
w którą z
shapes itself between 5 years of age and give or take 3 or 4.
5 roku życia plus minus tam 3 czy 4. Nie? To
The Bible has given us this information a long time ago.
wychowanie
That's why the bringing up of children was so important.
jednym z przykazań
That's why even one of the commandments in the 10 Commandments
czci, czyli szat,
says to respect your father and your mother.
jeden z fundamentów
It's one of the foundations of civilization.
szanuj ojca,
Respect your father and your mother.
nie buntu.
So, don't despise, don't rebel, don't be indifferent, but respect. That's the foundation of civilization. If they wanted to destroy civilization, well, they must destroy its foundation.
Naruszyć
They must infringe this process.
odpowiednio do drogi,
Train up the child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it.
dlatego komuniści
For that reason,
przejmą.
until communists take control over the young generation, in other words, over children,
Inaczej można powiedzieć, nie mają szansy zdobyć całego.
they don't stand a chance of capturing all of society because the family will always recreate healthy people.
Będą mieć telewizję,
They will have the television, they will have everything.
kontroluje wychowanie.
But while the family controls the bringing up of children, even though 30% of families might fail, 70% will win.
70% wygra. Dlatego trzeba,
That's why they must do something about it,
może tak być.
and we can't let that happen.
Proszę, co
Well then, here's what needs to be done. The communist goal is to destroy the transmission of values from one generation to the next.
Owszem, przejęli
They've indeed taken over universities, but we know that knowledge can be acquired at university, but not education.
metoda wychowania, bo wiedzę można dostać na uniwersytecie, ale wychowania to już na pewno nie. To każdy z was wie.
Everyone knows that.
W internatach
You've lived in boarding schools, in dorms. You know that there's no upbringing there.
nie będzie. Nie? Wiedzę można zdobyć,
Knowledge can be acquired there, but the upbringing is either acquired at home
ale rodzice wychowali
or not at all. Either your parents raised you, or you learned the hard way,
sobie
the basic truths which you could have learned from your wise parents.
prawdy, które inni albo ty sam mogłeś przejąć od swoich mądrych rodziców. Nie? Trzeba zniszczyć
The transmission of values in a family must be destroyed.
pomiędzy tym.
The bond between the older and the younger generation must be broken.
To jest cel.
That's the goal.
Trzeba zabrać dzieci.
Children must be taken away from under the influence of the older generation
Jest
because it's the backbone of
nikiem
backwardness and of Christianity worst of all.
i wszelkiego, i tego chrześcijaństwa najgorszego. No. Tych wartości chrześcijaństwa.
Those Christian values.
Coś,
Well then, something needs to be done with that.
no, tak
As we said, they took over the state.
już dzisiaj,
Do you remember when we were younger, we heard talks about parental authority?
nie? Dzisiaj nie ma już takiego pojęcia.
Today, that concept doesn't exist. Today, we hear some kind of parental care.
Piecza rodzicielska oznacza,
Parental care means that you give us the money and we'll steal your children.
czyli płać za kradzież,
So basically, pay for the theft of your children, pay for the upbringing of
ta piecza.
devoted followers. That's more or less parental care, and the German state is the role model of how it should be done.
Jak to trzeba robić, nie? Te Jugendamty to jest
The Jugendamt is a special government agency that must make sure that parents don't transmit Christian values to their children.
dzieciom chrześcijańskich wartości. To jest podstawowy cel.
That's the primary goal of this agency.
Czyli trzeba
In other words, the parental authority must first be weakened and then denied.
o tym decydować.
Of course, it's the state and the government that decides it.
To przejąć
So communists had to take them over.
konstytucję.
That's already happening today in the constitution and so on. But there must also be an appropriate media twist so that people will be happy about it, that they would willingly stalk each other or inform on one another.
Śledzili siebie nawzajem. Nie? Dzisiaj już to jest
Today it's already being done on a daily basis.
jedni drugi.
One person stalks the other to see if the family doesn't apply Christian educational standards.
Stosuje
If
dyscyplinę.
parents apply discipline,
Uczy
if they teach their kids godliness,
już jest
they're a target in Poland.
zarówno w Polsce, bo w Polsce już były
Because kids have already been taken away from the parents who were practicing discipline, who are giving them a Christian upbringing. It's already happening.
Unia Europejska.
That's the European Union, which our church, as the only one in Poland and maybe even in Europe, officially warned about in 2003. You can check that out for yourself.
Kościół Nowego Przymierza.
Only the New Covenant Church in Lublin, this, quote, apocalyptic sect, end of quote, warned that this would happen. So there you have it.
Macie. Dokładnie tak jak.
Exactly as we said.
I zanegować.
Weaken and deny parental authority.
Dalej następny punkt to jest
The next point is that the communists think
komuniści tak myślą. My
we can stalk them.
możemy
We can introduce laws.
wprowadzić prawa. Możemy
We can tame their kids that we receive at the age 7 so that they'll snitch on their parents.
żeby donosili.
After all, snitching on parents is common now.
Jest powszechne. Nie? Już szkoli się
Kids are being trained.
obywatelska
I don't remember which of the
komunistycznych.
communist cells was organizing workshops for the kids during the vacation period.
No, to wyższa odmiana komunistycznej platformy.
Anyway, there were workshops on how to snitch on your parents.
Jak donosić.
What kind of rights the students or kid supposedly has, and as soon as your parents break your rights, run to a police officer, and with a club, he'll make things clear to your parents.
To już się.
That's already happening.
Ale
But parents, here I'm talking from a communist point of view.
tu z pozycji komunistycznych mówię, oni
They have
mają
a
strach.
terrible weapon.
Oni kochają swoje
They
dzieci.
love their children,
I dzieci ich kochają.
and their children love them.
To jest
Communists call for vengeance from hell. How to eliminate it now?
zlikwidować. Jak sprawić,
How do we make parents hate their children and children hate their parents?
żeby znienawidziły swoich rodziców? Bo wtedy nasz plan,
Because then our plan will succeed.
bo zobaczcie, prawo to jedno,
Look, the law is one thing, but parents can enter the catacombs and there love their children,
kochać te swoje
love their families,
i przekazywać im dalej te
and pass on that Christian poison, that conservative superstition and fascism and racism.
wielkami Prince Polo razem. Musimy, to
It has to be changed.
jaka
Well,
metoda?
what method should we use to change it?
Musimy zniszczyć więzi.
We must destroy the family ties
Jaka jest
because that's the method of displaying love.
miłość
Where does love multiply? Speaking from a communist point of view,
językiem? No właśnie za pomocą więzi.
Well, by means of ties.
Muszą być blisko siebie.
That means people must be close to each other. They must meet up. They must mutually pay close attention to one another.
Nie? Muszą mieć
They must have an attitude of seeking good. They must experience that it's nice to be with family.
być razem z rodziną. Nie? To też nawet śpiewamy w kościele. Zobaczcie, jakie...
Yes, even sing that in church.
Trzeba to wszystko obrzydzić.
It has to be made revolting. But how do you do it?
Po pierwsze, trzeba
First of all,
do roboty.
people must be herded to work.
Jak będą robić
Because when they'll be working, they won't have time for those Christian things.
te chrześcijańskie? Na rodziny, na święta, na czas z dziećmi,
For family, for holidays, for time with children, for different things.
chłopów na 2 etaty.
First, you need to send men off for jobs.
Bo tu jest
And then that's not enough because we still have women in reserve and they've devoted themselves to children. They've brought them up. They did the laundry. They did the cleaning.
pokazywały
They talked with their children. They showed them various things. They pushed them to work. They punished them when needed. It can't be.
być kobiet z domu. Bo to
We want women out of their houses because they're our biggest class enemy. What has to be done?
robić, żeby chłop tym
Well.
na 2 etaty,
The man must toil at 2 jobs and it still can't be enough. So
spółka te
we have the Polish Prime Minister along with those knuckleheads from the Law and Justice Party.
i właśnie
They raise taxes so that the system where a man can provide for his family fails.
może zarobić na rodzinę. Oczywiście do tego jest
Of course, inside the economic coercion that forces a woman to work outside of her home and thus leave the upbringing of her kids to the state,
wychowanie swoich dzieci. Nie? Musi jeszcze dojść
there
propaganda.
has to be propaganda.
To, co wiem,
We know that Satan always
najniższy
exploits the basic instincts.
stan wykorzystuje
Both Satan and communism exploit egoism, primitive drives, and so forth.
niskie popędy i tak dalej. No to trzeba powiedzieć,
So, work at home must be seen as an indignity.
zniewaga. Nie? Trzeba
Women must be convinced that by working at home, they're inferior.
że jak pójdziesz
That by working in an office where your ass will grow bigger than the director's chair,
w tym krześle,
where you'll sit your whole life away,
to
that's your luck,
szczęście.
or your lot in life.
A jakbyś w domu
And if you were to be running in the house between the washing machine and the kitchen, waiting for your husband with a ready dinner,
to jest właśnie,
well, that's the worst possible fate for you.
to jest coś, co
That's something that you can never allow to happen in your life.
cię spotkało. To jest twoje
That's the biggest misfortune to find a loving husband and to have a family to whom you can dedicate yourself.
Poświęć się,
Dedicate yourself to transferring paper from one pile to another.
poświęć się,
Dedicate yourself to brewing tea for your boss.
niekiedy inne rzeczy też.
Other things too sometimes. That's liberation.
To jest prezent
Lucky for you and for humanity. It's a gift from the communist state.
całej ludzkości. No to się dzieje, nie będzie.
Well, that's happening.
Dalej, następny punkt. Jeśli już
Next point is that if parents find the time for their children within this underground, illegal family life,
tego życia rodzinnego na 2 etatach
where the man works 2 jobs, the woman works 1 job,
jeszcze znajdą czas dla
to
dzieci.
talk to them, to tell them stories before bedtime, to pray with them, to take them out for walks, to have a hamster or other pet,
Nie wiem, chodzą na spacery, czy mają czas na chomika, czy inne zwierzątko. Nie wolno do tego.
we can't let that happen.
Dlatego kolejny
Therefore, the next plan of communists is
to jest
entertainment.
najpierw będziesz harował,
First, you work like a dog,
a potem
and then you'll go and have some fun.
no zobaczcie, że z doktryną islamu jest to bardzo.
It's very convergent with Islamic doctrine, hence the affinity.
No i dzisiaj tak
Today, a man suffering under
Poncjuszem tym
the prime minister working 2 jobs comes back home, won't even look at his wife,
chodzi do domu, na żonę nie spojrzy, bo ona przecież nie miała
who, by the way,
tam masz
didn't have time to make supper, so she tells him to reheat the leftovers.
na serial,
She's watching a show.
a PlayStation albo
He goes on his PlayStation or some other game and
ci rozerwać.
uses that to have some fun.
Rozrywa, nie?
And that's what he does.
Ci oczywiście się rozrywają
Kids are, of course,
swoje.
keeping themselves busy with some games in another room.
To się
That's the plan. It's really not a coincidence.
to jest plan,
That's the plan to destroy families,
on działa.
and it works.
Ci ludzie się znienawidzą,
These people will come to hate one another. It's obvious.
się nawzajem denerwować.
They will mutually annoy each other because they're overworked. And even if they are a little rested, others will be disturbing them in their world of entertainment.
No kiedyś, co było na przykład
Back in the day, what used to be a nice way of spending time.
fajnym sposobem spędzania czasu. Nie? No, na przykład wycieczki.
Family trips, for example.
Dzisiaj też zrobili.
Today we have family trips as well.
Kiedyś to się
But back then, families would visit castles. The father would tell some story like a scout leader in a scout song.
w piosence harcerskiej, nie? Mama tam
The mother would tell something about the architecture
była na jakieś...
or about the art, that she would tell her daughter the story behind the painting.
Dziewczynko, zobaczcie ten obraz, to ten, tu taka historia. No, właśnie w ten
That's the way that family ties were formed and those values were passed along.
Gdzie jest wycieczka rodzinna?
Today, where's the family trip? Disneyland or some equivalent? How much time do kids spend talking with their parents in Disneyland?
Dzieci z rodzicami w takim Disneyland. Ja nie byłem na takiej wycieczce.
I've never been on such a trip. I never took my kids. But maybe some of you went.
Ile czasu tam jest na rozmowę?
How much time is there for a conversation?
Nie, bo jest atrakcja. Jest zero.
No, because there's an attraction. There is zero time for such things. Only, listen, let's go here, let's go there. Oh, look, there's something over there.
Poziom komunikacji
It's about the same level of communication that you have in a hypermarket.
to taka jest głębia.
That's how deep it is.
Porozmawiamy o kościołach.
We're talking about churches, and that's a very broad topic, so I really won't be able to exhaust it today.
Nawet nie ma.
There's no question about it.
Byliśmy w kościołach.
We were in this mega church where there was what we called, quote, a factory for children.
Nie? Godzinę trwało
The service lasted an hour. There was about, I don't know, a couple of thousand people.
ludzi, fajniuśko, muzyka, panienki.
Nice music and everything was nice, dancing, everything's going well. The sermon was even interesting.
Godzinkę, bach, bach.
Everything in an hour. 1, 2, back home, next round, back home,
Ale
at the next round. But meanwhile, something has to be done with the kids.
wyobraźcie sobie, że te dzieci...
And imagine that these kids were packed in a huge complex.
Nie? Oczywiście tam bez...
Of course, there was security and all that. We can't complain.
miłość tych ludzi.
The love of those people, but there's something that caught our eye.
Gdzie był czas na refleksję?
Where was the time for reflection? Within an hour, those children had to visit a dozen stations or so where there were various attractions.
Fajniuśkie atrakcje dla dzieci w moim pokoleniu.
For kids in my generation, one of those attractions per month would have been enough,
A oni
but they have
mają
15 of those in an hour.
atrakcji. Są przeprowadzani
They're led like donuts in a donut factory.
w tej fabryce donatów, nie tu tego,
Here and poof, and there you go for 3 minutes on that side, and then poof, and
bach odwraca
turn over 3 minutes on the other side, and poof, and time for drying. Poof, here's the frosting.
ten. No tak to wygląda.
That's what it looked like.
Zero refleksji
Zero reflection.
tego kościoła.
The child would walk out of this church, go home, and, well, something happened, but there was no bonding.
Bo to jest jak komp
It works like a combine.
przywiązane do sznurka, czy
They're tied to walking ropes or walk holding onto a string. They stick with the group. There were thousands of them, a factory for children. That's already in the church.
refleksji.
No reflection, no afterthought.
Zostanie rzeczywiście.
Something will indeed stay in their minds because they work in such a way to impact the memory by repeating certain things.
Tak, czyli element edukacyjny jest.
There's an education element to it. I'm not negating it, and I don't want to say that everything we saw there was bad.
Ale jedno jest pewne.
But one thing is certain, kids have no ties.
Nie przywiązane sznurka,
Those kids are tied together by a rope, but they have no friends. They don't have a scout leader who they can listen to.
borucha, którego słuchają z otwartą gębą i tak dalej, bo cały czas jest
Because there's always an outside attraction.
atrakcja.
In other words, amusement's in excess, as everything's in excess. It's a tool for destroying interpersonal ties.
Więzi międzyludzkich. Nie? Trzeba
So,
odwołać się
the methods used are to diminish and to deny parental authority, to ruin the family ties through the economic system, through the emancipation of women, through the entertainment culture.
teraz trzeba odwołać
No,
do
we must appeal to the lowest instincts of the young generation.
trzeba do najniższych instynktów
We must reach the younger generation's lower instincts.
dzieci seksualnie
Children must be sexually awakened at the lowest age possible, preferably at preschool age.
będzie wchodzić.
Then, nothing else will get in their minds. That's a simple goal of today's communists.
No, taki
The fourth point that I've prepared is that the values of the older generation must be made fun of.
starszego pokolenia. Trzeba ośmieszyć,
Old age must be ridiculed.
trzeba propagować
The youth cult has to be popularized, and the elderly must be only shown as being twisted, stupid, and mean.
jak
Do you remember when TVN tried to discredit the patriotic or conservative values of different gatherings, such as those of Radio Maria or the television
Maryja czy telewizja.
Tivam?
Zawsze stary, zwariowany
There was always an old crazy man or some
zajmował.
devotee in the foreground.
W Biblii
In the Bible, old age is shown as something that we can be proud of.
siwy włos to jest
Grey hair is a sign of maturity, it's a sign of experience.
skąd się biorą siwe włosy.
Where does grey hair come from?
Podobno ze stresu.
Apparently from stress.
Wiele przeżył.
That means this person went through some stuff. Some people have genetic predispositions, but grey hair generally is a sign that a person went through a lot, has seen a lot, and for that reason can serve by experience.
Kiedyś dzieci szły do...
Back in the day, kids went to their grandfather.
Bo,
I'm not talking about the one with the gold tooth.
który dom z wychodkiem tam posprzątał, po ciosie młotkiem i tak dalej. Ale ja pamiętam.
But I remember
się garnąłem do...
in my youth, I would want to go near older people to listen to what they had to say, and it was always an unusual experience for me
Zwykłe przeżycie,
that I remember to this day.
wojnie,
What they said about the war, about what was happening in the 70s on the coast in Gdansk,
opowiadali, co się dzieje.
about what's happening abroad, what the world looks like on the other side of the communist Iron Curtain.
To wszystko
I absorbed it all, often illegally, from the adult world.
świata dorosłych. To samo widziałem u swoich dzieci.
I saw the same thing with my children.
Tylko w naszym...
It just so happened that our church used to meet in our house originally. So besides various normal meetings, there were different interesting discussions, meetings where we would consider some difficult matters.
rozważać, no to dzieci się wysyłało do
So we would send our kids to bed.
różne techniki.
And they had various techniques to take part in these meetings.
Opowiadam.
I won't elaborate on that. But you can see that in a healthy family, in a healthy society, young people don't follow Facebook or play on some computer games,
Wiecie, jakieś Facebooka i gry komputerowe, tylko chcą
but want to come into the adult world even for a little while,
wejść w
because interesting things are taking place there.
ciekawe rzeczy. To jest normalne społeczeństwo.
That's a normal society.
Dzisiaj budowane
And the one that is being built today,
jest nudne.
the world of the elderly, is boring.
Z pogody chyba na jutro.
There's a scene from Tomorrow's Weather
Który przychodzi,
where Stur, an actor, comes to his daughter and says, "Come, I will tell you something about life."
co ty masz powiedzieć, czego ja
And she says,
w internecie.
"What can you tell me that I won't find on the internet?"
Widzisz, nie? Takie przesada, ale to właśnie jest cel propagandy komunistycznej dzisiaj. Przekonać młodych ludzi.
Convince young people that the world of their elders, the conservative world, the Christian world, are
Nuda,
boring,
ograniczenia, to
that
jest
there are limitations, sadness, that they're depriving you from real happiness. This is the propaganda.
Puszczaj się na każdym rogu
Debauchery in every corner. That's the plan for your life.
życie. Naćpaj się, nachlaj się. To jest
Get high,
prawdziwe.
get wasted.
Oni chcą
They're the real values.
jeść
Of course, the fight is still ongoing.
wszystkie dzieci.
Not all children are lost yet. Not all families are infected. But we see that the progress that communism has made in recent years has been enormous.
Ogromny. Pokazywałem już w liście
I've already shown in the epistles to the Romans that rebelling children against their parents is the plan. But whose plan is it?
Rzymian 1,
See Romans, first chapter, verse 20.
20 werset, tam jest o stworzeniu
There is talk about creation.
istota, chodzi o Boga,
For since the creation of the world,
kuista Jego moc i bóstwo mogą
so first of all, creation is a fact according to the word.
świata jest faktem i od stworzenia
His invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made,
poznana umysłem,
even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse.
dlatego
Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful,
znikł
but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened.
ciemności,
Professing to be wise, they became fools.
głupi. Czyli pierwsza grupa,
So the first part of the process is to deny divine creation.
ale
And right after that,
idzie drugi,
from Romans 1:23,
23 werset z 1 rozdziału listu do Rzymian i zamienili
and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into an image made like corruptible man,
chwalące.
and birds, and four-footed animals, and creeping things. That was verse 23.
Zobaczcie,
Look,
te dwa
today those two directions, the naturalistic one that says the world wasn't created by God,
powstał z gotowania w
that it arose from
i kierunku
primordial soup, and that the
katolickiego zespołu
second direction of the idolaters merged into one. As proof, I'll show you a priest called Janusz Hewa. He's one of those priests that is sent to the front line of youth of Twitter.
front młodzieżowy, na front Twittera. I kiedy my akcję
When we did the campaign, quote, "You want to destroy leftism, question mark, strike its foundation,"
chodzę od małpy.
the campaign, hash mark,
Pokaż
not from apes,
w wyniku gotowania,
shows that humans are not the result of primordial soup, nor a result of the natural processes, but that were created in the image of God.
co pisze
That's hashtag not from apes.
na front
What did the Catholic priest write?
biskup?
He who was sent to the front line of propaganda by bishops. Father Hewa wrote,
Szkodliwa
hashtag not from apes is a senseless and harmful campaign.
i szkodliwa.
Senseless and harmful. Two terms.
No to jak coś jest bez sensu, to
Well, if something is senseless, then how can it be harmful?
dobra, no to już jakaś
But that's Father Hewa's logic.
logika idzie dalej.
But the logic goes on.
Teoria ewolucji.
Quote, the theory of evolution has no meaning for faith.
Stary.
Unquote.
To już jest manifest, przepraszam,
That's today's Catholic manifesto.
dziś. Teoria ewolucji
Quote, the theory of evolution has no meaning for faith. Let the scientists deal with it. End of quote.
No ale zaraz.
But wait,
Teoria,
if the theory of evolution has no meaning for faith,
to jak?
then how can the campaign hashtag not from apes be harmful?
To nie ma znaczenia żadnego
Because if it has no meaning, well then,
logiki.
let's move on.
Przecież to jest
You won't find logic there.
komunistyczna.
That is catho-communist
Katolik
propaganda. Look how the Catholic Church goes hand in hand with communists, fighting Christianity and its foundations.
chrześcijaństwa. To pokazuje list do Rzymian.
That's what the epistle to the Romans is about. First, they rejected the truth about creation. Then, they began worshipping idols rather than the true God.
Prawdziwemu Bogu.
First, the Catholic Church, and then, together, we can see what they do.
To możemy zobaczyć.
Romans chapter 1, verses 30, 32. Backbiters, haters of God, violent, proud, boasters, inventors of evil things, disobedient to parents, who, knowing that the righteous judgment of God, that those who practice such things are deserving of death, not only do they do the same things, but they also approve of those who practice them. Which means that they expand it in the next generation.
Znaczy, rozwijają to w następne pokolenie. Następuje
They reproduce this system.
tego systemu. To jest ich cel. Zniszczyć młode pokolenie. Bo tak jak powiedzieli,
So that's their goal, destroy the young generation. Because as we said earlier,
to co
if a person is raised well, what will happen later?
właściwie wychowa,
Do you remember from the book of Proverbs
nie zejdzie do
22?
miłości. Od tych,
And when he is old, he won't depart from
że wiecie,
those values.
raz powstawał, ale ten kompas moralny
He may fall, rise up,
w kierunku, nie na wschód,
but with that moral compass, he will follow the right path. Not east, but west to America. Where do you come from? Why do you ask when you already know?
też, nie? Tak,
Bangladesh?
pani,
Back when she was Prime Minister, Miss
dokładnie
Shedwo, and more precisely Minister Zalewska, signed a contract with Bangladesh in 2016.
2006 rok, to nie teraz, znaczy 16, przepraszam, to nie teraz, to parę lat, 2 lata temu, nie? Kiedy jeszcze PiS w tej
Back when Law and Order Justice Party posed as a right-wing party, the contract was signed with Bangladesh to take in migrants.
pamiętacie jak niedawno taki
Remember when a certain someone from Radom was saying that tourists from Bangladesh and rich Arab countries came here to visit our mountains and valleys and
tych krajów
so on.
i zwiedzać nasze góry i doliny i tak dalej, a
And former minister
większym, bo to największe rozczarowanie,
Maciejewicz, and I say that with great sadness and disappointment, boldly lied to the Polish people, saying that these migrants
blisko
are not a phenomenon of multiculturalism in Poland,
sezonowo przyjechać,
that they only came seasonally to collect our apples and then they leave with the first frost.
wyjeżdżają. Dzisiaj rodzice tej
Today, the parents of that girl that was found dead, killed by a quote migrant,
przez nachodźców
know that they have been lied to.
zostali okłamani. Na razie tylko
For now, only them.
Polacy się przebudzą.
Will the Polish people wake up? That's the question.
Pytanie polityki.
That's a political and social matter.
Jeszcze przejdźmy na koniec na
This is a book-sized topic, and every church in the world should study this topic.
kościoły w świecie powinny studiować ten temat. A ile dzisiaj o tym mówię?
And how many people talk about it?
Słuchajcie,
Well, listen for yourselves. Look at what other churches have to offer.
przejdę jeszcze krótko
I'll briefly move on to the assignments for the church.
zadań dla Kościoła. Jak Kościół
If the church wants to preserve its role as the light of the world and the salt of the earth, what must it have? What must it do?
co musi robić? Po pierwsze, Kościół
First of all, the church must be fully aware
celu
of the goals and methods of the enemy, which today is
komunizmu.
devilish communism.
Kościół musi mieć pełną...
The church must be fully aware of the goals and methods of the enemy.
Liznęliśmy temat.
Today, we've only scratched the surface. This really should be one of the main departments in a Christian university.
Chrześcijańskiego. To jest właśnie komunistyczny.
To know what the communist deception is and how to protect ourselves from it.
Znacie taki wydział, na którym...
Do you know of such a field of study, even among Christian departments? At Liberty University, something like this is indeed taking place.
Tam każdego
There, 3 times a week, Christian students are gathered at meetings where, besides worshiping God and singing,
konwokacje, gdzie oprócz chwalenia Boga, śpiewania, mają porcję
they get a portion of solid knowledge about the world, political knowledge,
politycznej.
knowledge on what's happening, what are the enemy's plans, and how we're supposed to save ourselves from them.
Przed nimi ratować. Czyli jest parę miejsc
So, there are a couple of places in the world where this is happening,
nielicznych.
but still there are few.
Kościołów.
Most churches are on like the Titanic.
Już zderzenie z
The collision with the iceberg has happened, the sheet metal on one side is ripped, water is pouring in, but they say that it's only a little rainfall, and we shouldn't be worried about it.
niej walki.
Let's turn up the volume and dance on.
W większości
That's what's happening in most churches. The Bible bases in 2 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 11,
aby nas szatan nie podszedł,
lest Satan should take advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices.
znane. Zamysły szatana się...
Satan's devices vary depending on the culture.
Dlatego Kościół musi podążać za zmianami kultury i śledzić strategię diabła,
That's why the church must follow the changes in the culture and keep
być
track of it
dotowany.
and keep track of the devil's strategies in its generation in order to be ready for them to counterattack.
Pełna
So the first thing, full awareness of the goals and methods of the enemy.
globalizmu.
Today that's globalism and communism.
Kościół
Second, the church must work out modern methods of saving the family and the transmission of values from the older to the younger generation.
no bo to jest cel,
Because that's the devil's goal, to strike right there,
budować,
rebel the youth against the elderly and the elders.
czyli Kościół musi
So the church must develop modern methods against this goal and build a strong bridge between the elders and the youth in the churches.
rozbudować silny pomost między starymi a młodymi w kościołach. Będziemy jeszcze na najbliższym
We'll talk about this more in our next Christian gathering.
15 listopada więcej o tym mówić. Już zapraszam wszystkich z grup biblijnych. Tych
I'm inviting everybody from our Bible study groups, whoever isn't in a group, contact me, contact the nearest group.
ten temat.
We'll elaborate on this topic, how the attack on the church is carried out to destroy the ties between the younger and older generation,
Żeby zniszczyć więź między młodymi a starymi, żeby transmisja
to
autorytetu
break the transmission of authority from the top down and instead from communist authorities to the rebels in society and to the rebels in the church.
to jest prosty.
That's a simple goal.
Trzeci punkt.
Thirdly, the church must prepare a political elite to regain the state from the hands of communists.
Można jakiś czas,
You can live in catacombs for some time, but you have to prepare yourself and get out of them.
ale trzeba się przygotować do wyjścia z katakumb. O tym mówił już kardynał
This is what Cardinal Zen, who is fighting against the communist papacy in China, has already said.
w Chinach. On powiedział,
He told Catholics not to follow the papacy.
nie gódźcie,
He told them not to accept any agreement with communists.
zejdźcie do
He told them to go down to the catacombs, to hide from the Vatican, to hide from the communist government,
katakumb komunistycznym. I czekajcie,
and to wait until communism falls.
czekajcie,
I don't really like this plan.
nie czekajcie.
Don't wait.
Kościół ma
The church must act, not wait.
tylko. Czyli trzeci,
I spoke about the fourth point many times, but I keep on appealing. The church must cleanse itself internally.
wewnętrznie oczyścić. Kościół musi
The church must
wewnętrznie oczyścić.
cleanse itself internally in order to shine.
Apostoł Paweł,
The Apostle Paul expressed it this way in the Epistle to Titus, first chapter.
pierwszy rozdział. Wielu bowiem,
For there are many insubordinates,
mówiliśmy o dyscyplinie,
both idle talkers and deceivers, especially those of the circumcision.
zwodzicieli, zwłaszcza pośród tych, którzy są obrzezani. I tu Paweł mówi,
And here,
nimi podjąć dialog,
Paul's saying that we must start a dialogue with them. We must try to convince them.
przekonać, trzeba dać im.
We must give them a chance to defend their beliefs.
Otwórzcie sobie.
Well, open it for yourself.
Zamknąć ryj!
We have to shut them up.
To jest apostolstwo.
That's the apostolic teaching.
Diabeł nie może,
The devil cannot have a place in the church.
jego nauka.
His ways cannot be preached in churches.
Trzeba zatkać
We must shut their mouths
całe domy wywracać.
because they're turning houses upside down.
I tak
And so on and so on.
tym optymistycznym akcentem
And with this
zakończę
optimistic
dalej.
statement,
Tam do tego
we'll conclude.
od
I encourage you to further discuss the methods to shut the devil's mouth along with those of his agents
go agentom.
in the churches.
Do zobaczenia.
See you next time. All the best.